Professor Nasruddin is a professor of international relations. He is a director of Asia-Europe Institute. Also, he is a former president of Malaysian Association of Japanese Studies. Please welcome Professor Nasruddin.
Thank you very much. Sawadika, ohayo gozaimasu, and a very good morning to all of you. On behalf of the organizer, Institute of East Asian Studies, Dhammasaya University, Ramsey Campus, I would like to welcome our distinguished speakers, four of them, to plenary session 1 of the 4th JSA ASEAN International Conference. First, please allow me to convey my sincere gratitude to the organizer for giving me the honor to moderate this session. And the theme of this session is state and non-state actors in Japan-ASEAN relations and beyond. It has long been recognized that actors in international relations are not only states, but also non-state, as mentioned by Professor Koji Murata this morning during his keynote address. And state remains the main actor in world affairs, and today there are about 193, 94 national governments in the global system. And we are deeply honored to have with us this morning 4 distinguished professors from Thailand, from Malaysia, but residing in Singapore, from Singapore as well as from Japan. So we are now invite the first speaker, Professor Takashi Terada from Jsa Dv. Please.
Thank you very much, Nasruddin. Very good morning. My name is Takashi Terada from Jsa University, Kyoto, Japan. Why I'm sitting here to give a talk? Well, I don't know yet, but probably because I'm one of the steering committee members since 2005. But probably this year or next year is the 10th anniversary of this association. So I'm quite happy to be involved in this plenary session together with my old colleagues who have been working on the promotion of Japanese studies in Southeast Asia for years. I'm a political scientist and working on particularly international political economy in East Asia and the Pacific. Actually, my first job was given by, again, Singapore. And then Professor Tan used to be my own colleague in Singapore. So at that time, Japan-Southeast Asia relationships, particularly in government-government relationship, developed quite rapidly. But it seems to me it's not because of the Japanese government or Southeast Asian government's pure interest. It was actually stimulated, it seems to me, by the rise of China. China's approaches to Southeast Asia in 2000s were quite remarkable, and someone called it charm offensive. And China provides a lot of things which Southeast Asian countries wanted, particularly Indo-China nations like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, etc. But these are, of course, the latecomers to ASEAN, and they needed some assistances, obviously, for economic development. Japan used to play such an important role in the development of the so-called original member of ASEAN, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and of course Singapore. But how about latecomers, Indo-China states? Japan, yes, still continue to play a key role in terms of providing the economic assistances, even know-how, knowledge, information on the development. But China actually joined. So Chinese studies, learning Chinese languages in many Southeast Asian countries became quite popular, sort of the fad or trend. So this is one of the reasons why at that time I was in Singapore. we should probably come together to discuss at least once a 2 years time how we are working on the Japanese studies in the various countries of ASEAN member states. So again, this conference topic is states and non-state actors, right? So I'm talking about the non-state actors in the morning. I don't know, I'm assigned to give a talk in the afternoon session by Professor Kitty Prasutsk. So in the second session, I try to focus on more government-government relationship in Japan, Southeast Asia, or Japan-India relationships. But let me touch on the non-state actors. So my first one is universities, which our university president, Professor Murata, already mentioned in the keynote speech. With the colorful of the statistics, the trend of Japanese universities in the global world. But my focus is more on regional Japan, Southeast Asia. And of course, Japan, ASEAN, JSA ASEAN, this meeting has been quite strongly supported by Japan Foundation. And thank you very much, Mr. Taguchi, representing Japan Foundation for this conference. Hope we can continue to receive financial support. Japan Foundation was established in 1972. At that time, the Prime Minister was Tanaka Kakue. And if you knew, Mr. Tanaka came to Southeast Asia at that time. But in Bangkok, of course, if you were Thai, a lot of stories were happening. Particularly, probably last stories could be developed from his visit to Jakarta, Indonesia. Martial law was declared. And Prime Minister Tanaka was not allowed to get out of the hotel in Jakarta at all because of the riots. But this visit was not so bad for Japan, particularly future of Japan-ASEAN relations, because Japan started reconsidering its approaches. Then Foreign Minister was Takeo Fukuda, and he was pivotal in setting up the Japan Foundation, because economic business approaches to ASEAN or Southeast Asia was probably not welcome at that time. We should have a more innovative or new approaches to Southeast Asia. So more cultural, social, educational, these kind of approaches were more seriously considered in the Japanese government. And as you may know, Fukuda became Prime Minister 4 years later. And he visited Southeast Asia. What happened at that time? Riots? More riots? No, actually he was welcome. And the last visit, it was Manila. He actually delivered a speech named so-called Fukuda Doctrine, or Manila Doctrine. And 3 major principles included, but one of which was actually coined by himself. Actually, Fukuda Doctrine was well studied in both Japanese and English literature, even in Japan, a couple books. Also, Fukuda himself wrote his memoirs just prior to his passing away in 1995. So, catchphrase, Japan sent new relationship in 1970s was heart-to-heart relationship, 心と心の関係. Again, recently also I was reading a book written by one of the former diplomats involved in setting up this document. Also mentioned, this was actually Fukuda's idea, philosophy. Fukuda was a former government officer from Ministry of Finance. So he knew economics very well. That's why in the 1970s, Japan became the very first nation who overcame the aftermath of the oil shock. Partly thanks to his economic diplomacy maneuver. But such an economic technocrat, Prime Minister, was purely interested in promoting cultural social relationships. I think that's very important, and we can probably learn some lessons from the period at that time. Again, I mentioned he was pivotal in setting up the Japan Foundation. Even he was also pivotal in setting up Japan ASEAN Cultural Fund it still exists, and also developed into different funds. For example, Japan-ASEAN Integration Fund, ASEAN-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership Fund. This actually partly stemmed from the Japan-ASEAN Cultural Fund established in the late 1970s, thanks to Prime Minister Fukuda. And Fukuda also welcomed personally a so-called Southeast Asian graduate of Japanese universities. I think some of you are member of it, from Jakarta, from Singapore, from Bangkok. His hometown is Gunma. It's quite a good city for hot springs. So his son, Yasuo Fukuda, who also became Prime Minister of Japan, succeeded this trend of what his father created, welcoming those Southeast Asian graduates of Japanese universities to his hometown, enjoying hot springs together. I don't know how effective it could be in terms of the promoting Japan-ASEAN government-government relationships, but certainly this was actually based upon what his father created, heart-to-heart relationships. And now I heard one of the Japanese graduates, Southeast Thai graduate of Japanese universities, serving as a top of the Thai army. He is able to speak Japanese quite frequently. Again, probably Fukuda's idea, heart-to-heart relationships, promoting education-educational relationships, now came into fruition. So I think the Japanese university links, particularly with Southeast Asian countries, probably were initiated by government or particular prime minister. But this kind of trend probably not necessarily were pursued. But Abe, who just re-elected, well, they should be re-elected soon as a prime minister. We just finished the general election last night. He might be able to stay a prime ministership for next 3 or maybe 4 years. And he's one of the guys who promoted Japan-ASEAN student conferences when he was prime minister in 2006 and 2007. And I was in charge of it, partly in charge of it, and accepting the 10 ASEAN youth seats, so 12 ASEAN youth seats from 10 ASEAN member states into Japanese seats. And also we choose the Japanese students too. So week-long stay, combining their discussion together, living together, going to hot springs together. That's sort of the activities initiated by Prime Minister Abe's government in 2006 and 2007. Well, this is my hope. Abe-san remembers this. I think this is quite effective because most of them now late 30s, so late 20s, I'm sorry. They actually enjoy quite important positions in government or private companies. And they have their own Facebook, even Twitter. So their networks have been still, actively promoted through the the technologies. So this is a new trend. Prime Minister Fukuda, when he died in 1995, didn't know about, we have such kind of system like internet, twittering, etc. That was quite significant for promoting the heart-to-heart relationships. So this is probably related to what Professor Murata mentioned in quoting the Back to the Future story. So I think new trends should be capitalized to promote such an old idea of the social and cultural exchanges between Japan and Southeast Asia. And second thing is, again, I'm an IR scholar. I'm more interested in foreign policy, government-government relationships. The Osho University just organized the one symposium under the auspices of USJI, US-Japan Institute. It's a non-proliferation organization organized by 10 universities in Japan. And the Waseda took initiative, but currently they are chaired by University of Tokyo, based in Washington, D.C. Launching Japan issued through the internet, but twice in a year we have USJI week and Japanese and American scholars and policy-oriented people come together. So I'm privileged to attend the last 5 years in Washington, D.C. Initially, well, it's not so popular. But now, it depends on the sessions. But we have now 100 more than audiences in Washington, D.C. If you know D.C., every day, sort of some policy events, seminars, workshops are held everywhere. And we just try to join it to promote Japanese views on such a foreign policy, for example, U.S.-Japan relationships, or Japan's views in the Southeast Asia, for which I created a panel for a few years' time, to carry the Japanese views on that. So my interest is it possible or not to have this kind of similar stuff in one of the cities in Southeast Asia? Maybe, I don't know the title, but we call USJI, so maybe the ASEAN J Institute, or J ASEAN Forum forever. I know it's done bilaterally. Thai-Japan, for example. The Japan-Singapore Forum is existing for 10 years, something. It's purely initiated by government. But my point is, universities coming together to promote more policy-oriented issues. Even Japan-oriented information could be broadly carried. So this is something which I believe and useful, modeled after the so-called USJI approaches. So I should finish my talk in a few minutes then. My second non-state actors, significant in terms of the Japan-ASEAN relations, is actually private companies. Again, private companies considered to be an important factor. Particularly, the attention was given to this new actor in the 60s, especially when the so-called concept of interdependence, mutual interdependence, was promoted. It's an IR concept coined by Jsa Dv, who became later famous for his new concept, soft power, etc. But when I was a graduate student, even undergraduate, we needed to read Interdependence and World Politics. It's sort of the important text for the international relations scholar. An important factor was not the government. It's more private companies who carries wealth to developing countries. Also play an important role promoting or deepening mutual economic independence, for example, between Japan and Thailand, and etc. And recently I was involved in one of the study committee organized by Foreign Affairs on regional integration. This is my field. And I used to be there a couple of years ago, but members, scholars, were few non-state actors, but also government officers. But this time, topic was how the FTA regional integration can be utilized. Okay, negotiations are usually managed and done by government officials, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc. But who uses that? It's private companies. That's why private companies' viewpoint became quite significant, particularly after the all agreement became effective through the process of ratification. Congress people say, okay, that's a good idea, we should approve it. But it should be done, it should be used by private companies. And this study group was focusing on how we can use it for promoting investment, for example, for promoting trade in export and import. So that's why the members are all from private companies, or commerce and industries, Shoko Kaigisho, or JETRO, Japan External Trade Organization. It's a quite new member to me. Even government officers, not from Foreign Affairs. It's from Ministry of Finance in the Customs Office. Every day they are checking, the goods coming from overseas. Why is that important? I think the trend was not changed so much. They carry wealth. They also create the region. We are talking about ASEAN, for example. ASEAN was an international organization. That's why it's very easy to decipher where's the border. Because 10 ASEAN member countries. I heard East Timor is expected to join ASEAN in the future. So if so, demarcation of region could be more expanded. right? But who created this kind of region without government? It's private companies who check the domestic laws of Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and what kind of the all products could be best produced in a certain countries, then assembled where? This sort of the so-called production networks is a quite significant trend in Southeast Asia or East Asia as abroad. And as a result, employment and also government deregulations are also promoted. So it's a new trend. Still, interdependence is an important factor, but again, it's a new trend. Supply chain networks, production networks. So how we can utilize that, particularly for promoting, connecting to the university links or Japanese studies promotion in Southeast Asia, because this is the most important. We need money, right? Otherwise, we cannot organize this kind of conference. Again, Japan Foundation, that's why important, I have to repeat. However, now, again, Abenomics, do you know Abenomics? Right, a part of it was to promote Japan becoming weak and weak, Japanese yen. Of course, Japan Foundation's wealth has been decreasing. It's true for many international organizations related to Japan. So if Abe-san wants to Abenomics more and more for the next few years' time, yen might be weaker and weaker. So in this case, having this kind of conference overseas might be a bit difficult. So who we can rely on? Maybe private companies. I know it's not something which I should talk in an academic conference, but it's a realistic world. This is very significant, without which we cannot survive. So how we can get to the support and the trend funds from the private companies, I think that's more important. So we should talk to these kind of new actors, not only government officers, not only Japan Foundation officers. Also, we should invite the private sectors, private companies, particularly for making them well understand what's the trend of Japanese studies, and of course, more importantly, how it can be relevant to their own businesses. Promoting, understanding the Japan studies in Southeast Asia is not a bad story for them. So hope, JSA ASEAN in the future can be also considering this kind of stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Terada. In 2005, we got invitation from National University of Singapore, led by Professor Tam Leng Leng. We formed the JSA ASEAN in Singapore in 2005, and in 2006, we organized the first JSA ASEAN International Conference. Our second speaker is Professor Tam Leng Leng, former head of the Japanese Studies Department in National University of Singapore. Please welcome Professor Tam.
Do you want to go down so that you can look at the slides as well? Sorry, I'm being quite informal here because we are already old friends now after so many times of getting together and organizing conferences and discussing plans of the association. I'm very honored to be able to be invited to give a talk at this first plenary session, thanks to Professor Kitty. But actually I was very worried because it's a very international relations kind of topic, talking about actors, state actors and non-state actors. And as an anthropologist, a social culture anthropologist, that's very much on the ground with people as they are. So I was having some problems trying to decide how to give a talk like this. So after talking to Professor Kitty last night over dinner, I overhauled my whole presentation. So it's quite different from what I set out to do just 2 days ago. So I'm going to talk about people. people as non-state actors. So I'm actually giving, this word of non-state actors a very different meaning and very different interpretation. And I think when we talk about Japan-Southeast Asia relations, you talk about flow of people across Japan and Southeast Asia. I think Professor Murata talks about the students from, for example, from ASEAN countries going to Japan universities and so forth. We have this very heavy flow from one direction to the other, from Southeast Asia to Japan, either as students or to work, migrants. I think Philippines, you also have, talk about labor migrants and so forth, and women moving over to work, to get married and so forth. But I would like to focus on the Japan-Southeast Asian flow in terms of this reverse direction of Japanese coming over to Southeast Asia. And I'm going to really focus on this contemporarily, what's happening now, the flow from this direction from Japan to Southeast Asia, and more specifically, I'm going to just talk about three main categories of people that I have somewhat done some research about over the years. So the first will be expatriates. I think Takashi Sensei talks about this. Companies is very important, and companies are very important indeed to have and allow for more Jsa, the expatriates from Japan, to come and spend time in Southeast Asia. And also about 15 years ago, we start to see more of Japanese women who are coming over to Southeast Asia as to seek employment, and many of them are also end up eventually marrying to Southeast Asians. And then the third trend, which is a little bit much more recent, is to look at older people, retirees, who are moving from Japan to Southeast Asia. So I'll talk briefly about these three categories. And I was thinking about what kind of conceptual framework can we make to understand this whole flow of ideas or of people across. And as we, when we talk about the people across, especially in terms of expatriates, it is very common to use frameworks such as Eric Cohen's idea of expatriate community as permanent tourists, as people who tend to live in environment bubble or in enclave. And I think we kind of see this, for example, if you are going to visit Ayutthaya, 2 days later, they have the Japanese village, the Nihonmura there, as early as the early 17th century. So this whole idea of environment bubble or enclave has been very, something that is quite common, when we move as a group to another country, and you will tend to form, to want to be together for the comfort in a strange environment. But I also feel that beyond that, as things are changing with this globalization and so forth, probably we can also look into frameworks such as this one by Mary Pratt of Context Zone. It's actually, Pratt has, she situated this idea in area of language, communication, and culture, and look at context zone as a space for cultures to meet, clash, and grapple with each other. She actually talked about this whole idea in a very different manner, talking about multicultural classroom. But I like to bring out this idea when we think about how to conceptualize this meeting of cultures. When Japanese move over to Southeast Asia in a new culture, a new environment, new society, maybe something could come about as they meet and grapple with each other. But I have to say a caveat that over here I really look more one-sided into the Japanese as the actors here, as they connect or do not connect with the Southeast Asians. Okay, so I'll start with Japanese expatriate community, and I just look at Singapore as a case. We have about 25,000 Japanese in Singapore, according to the Japanese embassy. I think there are a lot more that may not have registered with the Japanese embassy. Literature in Japanese expatriate, in Japanese community. Actually, when we talk about Japanese community in Singapore, we eventually, or we actually are talking about the expatriates in Singapore, usually. So literature in this area, such as by Ayab and Ari, talks about the homogeneity in demography and social makeup. And we talk about how they are typically making up by managers that were there because of the Japanese companies, MNCs, branching into Southeast Asia. So, so they play a very important role, not just in providing potential funding for conferences like ours, but really forming the community that you see making out of Japanese in the region. And they, in the late 2000s, many of them used to be, in the late 30s to early 40s, and you can see later on why, we have such big Japanese primary schools because of the makeup of the Japanese expatriate families. But more recently, we in fact see more of single expats being sent by the companies from Japan, partly because, as I learned, was probably to save costs, because bringing a family over could be quite expensive for the companies. So when we talk about enclave, residence is something that I'm sure you find in Thailand, in Bangkok as well. Certain areas in Singapore, you do have more Japanese population, workplace as well in Japanese, Japan-related companies, and education, as I said earlier, it's an important enclave in that sense. In Singapore, we have 2 campuses of elementary school, one in Clementi, one in Changi, and they have about 2,000 students, so probably one of the biggest elementary school of Japanese elementary schools overseas. And we also have junior high school, senior high, and a whole range of services that is related to education. So these are some of the you have from 0 year. Once the child is born, there are some educational places that they could go, kindergartens, which not just the Nihonjin Yochien, but also others, normal kindergartens that have Japanese teachers, and then the Japanese schools, primary schools, and Kumon, Jiku, the Waseda Jiku is also in Singapore, and then also this high school. So in a sense, we can really look at it as an enclave, being very much on their own. But if you look more closely into what they do, I think my contacts with the Japanese students that are studying in Singapore show that they do learn things beyond what they will learn if they're just in Japan. For example, Japanese students tell us that they learn about the Karayuki-san that was in Singapore at the turn of the century, learning about the Japantown that used to exist at the turn of the century in the Bugis area, about the Second World War, and also things like this where they try to learn about multicultural understanding, education in Singapore. So I think Murata Sensei did talk about how important it is. Education is playing a much more important role nowadays because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And this makes it much more important that although you are situated outside, you are a Japanese school situated outside Japan, you really have to be more connected with what's happening around you. And the other enclave that we will normally refer to is Nihonjin Kai in Japanese Association in many parts of the region. And in Singapore we have a Nihonjin Kai, and of course, at one glance it's very Japanese in the sense of the kind of things and activities they do. But if you look more closely, for example, the volunteer group is very active in Nihonjin Kai in connecting with the local community, in doing volunteer works and in the aged services and for children, disadvantaged children and so forth. And also in Singapore we have this festival called Chingay Parade. During the Chinese New Year we will have floats and a big parade that's going on. And Japanese Association has been very active in participating in the Chingay Parade for more than 10 years. So I think it really shows how much, although they are very much within an enclave in a sense, but they are also reaching out to the local host society. And this is the Japanese festival, the summer festival, Natsu Matsuri, in the Japanese school in the Changi campus that happens every year for one afternoon to the evening. And over the many years that it has been, I think the 27th year now, it has become very much a local event as well. We do have at least half the people who go there are Singaporeans. I think this year they say that there are 8,000 people and at least 4,000 are Singaporeans. Every year I get my students to go there and do the field work, ethnographic field work, and they always say that it's so localized sometimes. It's getting much more localized, and you do see a lot more locals that are in yukatas in the festival. So, so moving from community, I would like to take a look at the Japanese women in Southeast Asia. This table shows you in more broad terms about long-term and permanent resident migrants that are out of Japan, the Japanese that are overseas. You could see that from 1970 on and now, the big changes is that there are more and more female that are out of Japan. They're moving out of Japan. And since the late 1990s, women have outnumbered men for those Japanese who are living overseas. For those staying for 3 months and over on of a short-term visa, you still continue to have more men because many of them are chooser in being sent by the companies to move overseas for a short period. But if you look at permanent residents, female outweigh men. Yeah, because many female marry to foreigners and stay outside Japan. So if you add them together, since late 1990s, women have been consistently outnumbering men in going overseas. So I have done studies on Japanese women who are working in Singapore, and we have also talked to Japanese women who are working in Thailand or in KL and so forth. In big cities, Japanese women are working there, and more are coming over because they find that they need to look for jobs, and there are job opportunities because of companies that are being set up here. But I just want to bring to you a little small case of Japanese women who are in Bali. When we were in Bali, this was actually quite a surprise for us to find that in Bali you do have quite a lot of, not a lot, but enough for us to study as anthropologists, looking at Japanese women who are married to Balinese men. This is the figure from the consulate in Japan when we were there in late 2009. They talk about, in 2009 there were like almost 2,000 people and more female than male. Okay, and then just imagine, in 1978 there were only 6 Japanese who were in Bali. So we did a study on Wubuk. Denpasar, as you know, is the more city area of Bali. Wubuk is the highland area that is famous for traditional Balinese craft and dance and music. So many women apparently were there to study. They were mesmerized by Balinese culture, so they went there to study Balinese dance or batik painting or music, gamelan music and so forth. And then eventually some of them married Balinese. Some of them married Balinese who were the teachers, the dance teachers, the art teachers. Some of them married the men who they used to rent their house at and things like that, so, or in the tourist sites and so forth. So some of them married beach boys, but not so many in the Ubud area. So I think that was a very interesting discovery from us, and we did a couple of papers on this area. When we look at transnational families, we were looking at it at transnational families of Balinese Japanese. I think there are a lot of interactions and integration in the sense that as Japanese brides, they were very much immersed into the culture. They learned Indonesian language, and many of them embraced Hinduism in Bali. So they would tell us about what do they do to be joining in the festivals in the villages and so forth. Because apparently, when you marry into a Balinese family, you don't just marry that man, you marry the whole village. So you have to learn a lot of cultures and stuff. And the Japanese women that we were talking to were doing it so gracefully and so well and so willingly. But it's also interesting that as Japanese mothers, when they have children, they were very determined to raise dual cultural kids. They wanted very much to transmit Japanese culture to their children, so they send their children to weekend Japanese classes and so forth. And also, many of them eventually retain Japanese citizenship for the sake of the children, because they want to give the children a choice as well. And we do come across families who moved to Japan for 8 years and 10 years to work, earn money, and then came back eventually to Bali because they felt that Bali was a better place for them to raise children. So that kind of interaction, that kind of people on the ground interaction of how culture becomes integrated to people, and then the bicultural children that you raise and so forth. I think they are very interesting areas as well for us to understand about Japan-Southeast Asia relations. Okay, so when we move on to retirees was also another area that we have studied, because we started to realize, if you go to Chiang Mai, for example, Chiang Mai now has very good Japanese food, not because of tourists, but because of the retirees who move there. They might stay short term, maybe only in the winter, they may stay there for long term, but they have actually enriched the cuisines there in Chiang Mai, so you can have cheap and good Japanese food in Chiang Mai nowadays. And retirees retirees moving out of Japan is a fairly new thing that happens in the 1990s. And one of the ideas was this Daini no Jinsei, this second life, that what we can do in second life, this active second life that we want to pursue. So with that, we see more Japanese moving to Southeast Asia, because they say Southeast Asia is a good place for playing golf, for retiring with you don't have so much, you retiring enough with just your pension income and so forth. So with that, Japanese retirees, I think one of the interesting things we studied with the Japanese retirees is how much state actors also play a role, how much government is also trying to promote this, and how business operations are coming in for relocation. So industries have components such as the tourist industries, trying to initiate long stay tourism. We have the real estate industry that trying to identify purchasers, and medical care providers. So you have also medical tourism that came into picture. And then you also have, like in Thai, you have the long stay management company to welcome you to retire for long stay in Thailand. And Philippines, you have the Philippine Retirement Authority playing a very important role in trying to promote this retirement. And Malaysia, as my second home program, is another important state actor, I would say. Okay, so and on the one hand, there are an enclave. We see enclave there. For example, the Silver Paradise Resort in the Philippines. They say that they built this resort, the businesses, and they targeted the Japanese. There were very few Japanese who actually went in to stay there, but they were still determined to say that, okay, this is catered for Japanese, and they didn't allow Koreans to come in and stay and so forth. And all the staff there were trained to speak in Japanese. And you do have retirees that are forming their own Japan club to outreach, to support each other. But at the same time, if you look more closely, there are also chances of platform to outreach where they do several activities with the community. And then there's another things that's happening will be the liaison with local women that you see. You see mixed parentage becoming more common. You see, especially places, like in Thailand, Philippines, there tend to be more single men who are single when they're here, and having liaisons with local women and having a relationship with not just the women but the whole village as well, in terms of getting care from them and so forth. And then also, I think one very interesting development, important development, is how the volunteers, the volunteerism that's happening in local community by the retirees. So I just want to end with this case of Banrom Sai, which is a orphanage that's built and set up by Miwa, Miss Miwa from Japan, who was in Thailand in her 50s when she was looking to retire somewhere, and she found that her calling to open up an orphanage for HIV-infected children in Chiang Mai. Over more than 10 years, she's still here, and she is not only just an orphanage, she's also starting cottage industries and so forth, and set up shops in Japan to sell the products that were made at these cottage industries in Banrom Sai. So I think her example is very inspiring in helping us to understand how relationship on the people basis can go far and can go reach, depending on how much people are willing to invest in each other. So I will just end by saying that I think in future we can expect more dynamic, more active relationships with globalizations and also encompassing different generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dv, for your presentation. Our third speaker for plenary session 1 is Dr. Tang Siwan. Dr. Tang is a senior fellow at Singapore's Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, ICS. Please welcome Dr. Tang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Sorry. Good afternoon. It's already noon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Please allow me a few minutes to firstly thank the organizers for inviting me here to join this panel, and also to represent the Malaysian Japanese Studies Association, Madras, to participate in this conference. Also, heartiest congratulations to Thammasat University for your 80th anniversary. And last but not least, we have heard a very moving tribute to our dear friend Lydia. As always, she has been known as no formalities, no professor this and that. It's always on a first name basis. I think most importantly, it's not just to remember and honor, but also to celebrate her life. I think it's a life that she has lived well, and as you can see today, quite a few tears were shed, and with the legions of students, friends and colleagues that she has over her decades of contribution to academia and Japanese studies, her contribution and her life still lives on. So condolences to the family, but also we will still continue to honor her. To my presentation, I have two versions of my presentations. One I was going to work on more on the non-state actors, but after listening to Radha Sensei's presentation, I was thinking of going to opt for version 2. Finally decided to have a hybrid of version 1 and version 2, so it may be a bit disjointed. First, let me start off with something that I'm very passionate about in my previous life as the Director of Foreign Policy and Security Studies at the ISIS Malaysia. And one point that we have always been trying to make and to impress on our friends in Japan and so elsewhere is Japan is still important in the region. And now, I don't think that is right. Japan is more important at this point in time than ever. It has always been important, but at this point and moving in the future, it is going to play a very, very important role. Why do I say this? Yes, China is a big factor. As far as ASEAN strategy is concerned, our ASEAN member states, where do we go in the future? Where would we, how do we decide our future? It is a future that we have to work with China, and more importantly, to work with Japan. If we leave Japan out of the equation, then we only have one option, that is Beijing, that is China. And right now, we do not know the direction of where China is going to be. It's always been telling us that China's mantra and focus is peaceful rise. To me, as a layperson, if somebody tells you that I'm peaceful, I'm nice, then it makes you wonder, why do you need to impress others that you are nice, right? Our colleague has said that in the last 10 years, China has embarked on a charm diplomacy. Right now, most analysts would say China is not so charming after all, right? Events in the South China have shown that perhaps we are beginning to see another side of China. So for us in Southeast Asia, we're thinking of our future. We need to have a plan B, we need to have a plan C, we need to think of other strategic options. And this is where ASEAN and Japan has similar interests, in the sense that we want to work together, a phrase that China always uses, win-win relationship. And I think Japan has been living and also implementing a win-win situation since, well, 50s, 60s, until now. But the frustration that some of us, including myself, sense in the last 10 years is that Japan has more or less, in some sense, forgotten about Southeast Asia. The importance of us have declined somewhat. To give you a very good example, there was a period in time J-pop was so popular, anime and so on, the Hello Kitties. It is still there. It's not the main thing. It's been superseded by K-pop. Where is J-pop now? It's not the main thing, right? So it was a lost opportunity there. And in all surveys, consistently, if you ask Southeast Asians, what is your first impression of Japan? What do you see Japan most? Technological leader. It's famous for its science and technology, innovation. This you're talking about the Sonys, right? But Sony is a company that has not been doing well, to put it diplomatically. When you think of handphones, you think of Samsung. So our students are a generation that have lived through a generation where Sony is my grandfather's generation. You're no longer in touch. It is the new Samsung phones. So in our mindset, I think that is very important in the sense that where do we see Japan? If we don't see Japan as being as a frontier, then strategically, politically, policy, I think it follows that perhaps we might not think of Japan that often. And it translates in diplomacy, it translates into how our relations are. So, but I think it is not a lost cause, right? Japan has a huge reservoir of goodwill, and we have lots of friends in the region. Anecdotals, it's not just in this room. Many out of these rooms has benefited, have lots of friends. It is time for Japan to leverage on these friendships. Yeah. For J-pop to have a second win, why not? Or third win. You need to come back stronger, you need to be very visible. And I joined Terada Sensei in paying homage and also to recognize the good role that Japan Foundation has been doing all these years. But for my interaction with Japan Foundation, I also know that Japan Foundation is laboring under circumstances that's very challenging. Its budget has been declining. So how do you expect good people at Japan Foundation to promote Japan when it's not given the amount of money that it deserves? And as far as the Japanese government is concerned, the embassy has limited budget, or to say these are certain things that we do not do in terms of people-to-people and cultural diplomacy. Limited budget and limited responsibility. In that sense, who does it? It is organizations such as Japan Foundation and many more. So if the Japanese government does not continue to sustain or improve the funding for Japan Foundation and other organizations, then the imprint and our sensitivity towards Japan and all things Japanese is going to decline. Right? How many Japanese institutions do we find in Southeast Asia? How many Confucius institutions do you find now? I think there's a big difference. In China, it's cut very well into institutionalize its presence, and it's going to go stronger. So Japan has to step up and match what China is doing. For us, we will welcome that because you give us an alternative to China. And also for us that it would prevent the advent of perhaps a Chinese hegemonic presence in the region in the next 10, 20, 30 years. China has always said that it would not want to be hegemonic power. Maybe not today. Can you guarantee that in 25 years? Never. Difficult to say. Americans will also say that it's not hegemonic. But diplomats would know, right? I think Japan, Korea, and Australia have been strong enough not to join the ASEAN Infrastructure Investment Bank. To me, that is a form of hegemonic influence by the Americans in dictating our future. So I think, again, foreign from Terada Sensei is a very good point. Why does Japan pay so much attention to US to have this US-Japan kind of engaging the youth and the young leaders to think about the future? Where does Japan think about us in ASEAN? Pick up Terada Sensei's very good point. Japan needs to decide whether its future is with the Americans in North America or its future is in Asia with us. If not, then plan A is going to be China. Now, it's not fair to put all the responsibility on Japan. When we come to moving forward in the relationship, where is ASEAN? It's quite heartening to see that of all the 4 or 5 logos, it's not all Japan. We have the good institution from Professor Tan Ming Ling and US supporting this conference. But it will be even nicer to see more local Thai, Malaysian, Philippine institutions, companies to support Japanese studies. So we as Southeast Asians, I think we have a responsibility to step up to the plate as well. We have to promote our relations with Japan, not just relying on the handouts, the funding and endowment from Japan. It should not be a one-way street. It should be both ways. There are lots of opportunities, right? Traveling to Japan is more affordable thanks to things like AirAsia. Everyone can fly, right? Currency exchange rate has also made it more cheaper, inflation and so on. And things that you don't see 10 years ago where, at least in Malaysia, the halal industry, halal tourism to Japan, when Japanese companies and restaurants is achieving this halal certification to allow more Muslim tourists to go to Japan. So you're broadening a different generation, a different group of people who know Japan. And that is, I think, something that we can leverage again. People are going to Japan. When you go to Japan, you cannot not fall in love with Japan. There's very little that you can fault Japan. There's the culture, the people, right? Everything. The only thing that if you do not like fish, then Japan is not a place for you, right? It's onigiri 24 hours, yeah. But then you have very good noodles. But from that, more tourists going to Japan, they're going to bring back their memories, their association, and that desire to know more about Japan. So we have to do more in our respective countries to promote Japan, to make sure that next generation of students study Japan in all disciplines. So it is also our responsibility. It is just not just the other way around. Yes, the Genesis programs have been very popular, very successful in bringing Southeast Asian students to Japan. But what about bringing Japanese students to Southeast Asia? I know NUS and a few others have been doing that, but not enough. Not all countries. We need to do more to actually engage Southeast Asian Japanese students to come here and Japanese people to come here, and not just as tourists, but to understand us. Yeah. I think I'll end on just 2 very quick points before my chairman hands me a note to wrap up. In terms of sustaining the relationship, we cannot just rely on the government. Government is important to fund semi-government institutions like the Japan Foundation, but the rest of other actors comes into play. Not just universities, but so you can see the pioneering role of the industries like medical tourism. So there needs to be a more rounded approach to how we see things. The relationship between us should not be one of developed country, Japan, and us developing. It should be more balanced. And I would hope to think that after, at least 40 years, most of us would have minimum of 40 or 30 years of bilateral official relations with Japan. Right? That we would have achieved or nearing achieved of maturity, where it's no longer a one-sided relationship. It should be both-sided relationship. It is not just about we going to Japan, but getting the Japanese to come here and also to understand this. So in terms of strategic international relations, we would welcome and to work with Japan to understand our concerns in Southeast Asia. And also for us, I think in ASEAN member states, we are really in a twilight zone kind of situation where are we going to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years? There are a lot of intangibles. Number one, is China going to remain quote-unquote peaceful? Will China's economic growth continue or will it implode? What if the GDP's growth rate goes below 7? That's where unemployment in China will be in the tens and maybe hundreds of millions. I'm exaggerating a bit, but you get the picture, right? The China we know now is a rich China. What if China becomes less rich and political instability? 10 million refugees going to Vietnam will be chaotic, will be disasters, will be a disaster, right? America, well, thankfully they managed to pass the budget, right? Will the next president going to be an Asian Pacific president or give so much attention to us? America is declining relative to China. That is a fact. Where would Japan be? Would Japan still piggyback on America? Where would Australia be? And we have some panel on India. What role would India play? So the region is in a real flux in the sense that we do not know who the actors are and the role they will play, and even the actors. Is it going to be an energetic, interested actor, or is this going to be actors going to be just for show, right? What kind of Japan will show up? What kind of China will show up? What kind of US will show up? And what will we do in terms of ASEAN? I think I commend the organizers that we think of Japan, ASEAN, we think of 11 flags. But today, ASEAN centrality is here. We all 10 ASEAN nation states represented by one flag behind us. That I think is a very good start for us to think together, right? But ASEAN 10 itself is not just a future for Southeast Asia. It is future for East Asia. And that includes very much Japan and Japan at the centerpiece, right? So I don't mean to be a bit too critical. I'm critical because I see Japan continue to play a very, very important role. If Japan remains disinterested or not putting ASEAN at a central role, then Japan's future in the region will be bleak. And our future in the region will not be good either. So in this sense, we need to work together. Yeah? Not to balance or work against China, right? But to work with China, to work with America, to work with everybody. So it is a good future that we can look to, but the key word here is how to manage that kind of relationship. So to end on the theme, yeah, not just relying on the state, but non-state actors. Not just relying on Japan alone, but ASEAN and Japan must also work together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Finally, our fourth speaker is Professor Nopado Chat Praset. Professor Chat Praset teaches history at the Faculty of Liberal Arts at Thammasat University, and he is a committee member of the Japanese Studies Center in Thammasat University. So please welcome Professor Chat Praset.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to be invited to join the JSA ASEAN International Conference 2014 on state and non-state actors in Japan-ASEAN relations and beyond. As the last panelist in this morning session, I have a lot of opportunity to learn a lot of interesting ideas and information from three prominent scholars, Professor Therada, Professor Tang, and Dr. Tang. Of course, those presentations enlightened me a lot about the state and non-state actor in Japan and ASEAN relations. For me, I would like to focus on the local administration and local government actors, which in my opinion are still not adequately studied in Thailand. Because of time constraint, I would like to focus specifically on the relation between Bangkok Metropolitan Administration or BMA and some local administrations in ASEAN and Japan. In the era of globalized world, local governments are faced with challenges that extend beyond national borders. International economic relations, technology transfer, and cultural exchanges are examples of various aspects which most local governments have to manage. Consequently, these political entities have gradually become another essential actors in international relations. Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, which have been also affected by an increasingly globalized world, has been forced by this international context to be also internationalized. According to the mentioned context, Bangkok Metropolitan Administration has a large local administration with the status of special administrative zone, effectively has duties to promote relations with foreign cities, city networks, and international organizations in order to promote the people's well-being. For the cooperation between BMA and other local governments in ASEAN and Japan, both bilateral and multilateral frameworks have been utilized. For the bilateral frameworks, I found that sister city relationships play a crucial role in cementing the relationship between Bangkok Metropolitan and city, provinces, and prefectures in other countries. At least 26 local governments have already signed sister city agreement with the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration. In this cooperative framework, many aspects of cooperation in various sectors have been done, such as in education, public health, environment, and transportation. Among 26 cities which consider Bangkok as their sister city, 6 cities are Southeast Asian cities. They are Manila, Jakarta, Phnom Penh, Hanoi, Vientiane, and Penang. For the relationship with the Japanese local government, Aichi Prefecture and Fukuoka Prefecture have signed sister city agreement with BMA. For the multilateral cooperation, Bangkok Metropolitan Administration actively joined many multilateral frameworks which have been created to strengthen the relationship between local government in Asia Pacific. For example, the ASEAN Network for Major Cities 21 or ANMC 21, Asia Pacific City Summit or APSC, the regional network of local authorities for management of human settlements in Asia and Pacific or CityNet. In addition, in order to support the ASEAN Committee, which will be materialized next year, Bangkok Metropolitan Administration also strongly support the meeting of governor mayors of ASEAN capitals. After actively joining the first meeting in Jakarta last year, BMA decided to host the second meeting of governor mayors of ASEAN capital this year. The meeting was recently held in Bangkok last month in November. The theme of the second meeting in Bangkok was ASEAN Goals Local, Initiatives for Cooperative Networks. The meeting is an annual meeting of representatives of ASEAN capitals aiming to create a concrete framework for the contribution of local administration, working towards building a strong ASEAN community. These meetings provided an opportunity for the leaders of ASEAN capital to establish cooperative framework through exchanging information and viewpoints, as well as sharing best practice. This meeting would also lead to tangible constructive results for city development and the people's well-being based on the principle of the promotion of people-oriented ASEAN. In this meeting, cooperation in many aspects were discussed. For example, migration, public safety, disaster management, transportation, infrastructure, tourism, education, culture, public health, environment, and also civil society, all kind of issue and we discussed in this meeting. From the information which were presented, I have some ideas to share with the distinguished participants in this forum. Firstly, for bilateral relations, I think that more sister city agreement between local administration or local government in ASEAN should be encouraged. In the case of Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, besides the 5 sister city agreements which have been signed with 5 capital cities of ASEAN members, similar cooperation with the rest of ASEAN members should also be done. Secondly, for the multilateral cooperation, the meeting of governor mayors of ASEAN capital should be strengthened to become the sustainable mechanism to promote the cooperation among the capital cities in ASEAN. In addition, local government from other regions should also be invited to cooperate in the sector which mutually benefit all concerned parties. Thirdly, it is noticeable that Japanese have been actively utilized the local government as alternative diplomatic tools. Japanese local governments have played significant roles in the creation of MC21, which I have already mentioned, and also APSC, and have continuously played an active role in this framework since the creation of these two organizations until present. In addition, besides the activity of the Japanese in multilateral framework, which have already been mentioned, the Japanese proactive role in developing the relationship between Japanese local government and their counterparts in other nations can also be seen from the role of the Japan Council of Local Authorities for International Relations, or CLAIR, C-L-A-I-R, CLAIR. CLAIR was formed in 1988. It was designed to assist local government in mission which related to complex globalized world. Therefore, CLAIR worked closely with the 47 prefectures and 19 designated cities to cooperate in various dimensions with local government in other countries. In terms of relation with the ASEAN local government, considering from the Japanese potential, it seems to me that these potentials have not been fully utilized. In case of Bangkok Metropolitan and Japanese local government, only 2 sister cities relationship were created between Bangkok and Aichi Prefecture and Bangkok and Fukuoka Prefecture. Compared with centuries of further Thai-Japanese relation, it is clearly seen that the role of these actors in Thai-Japanese relation have not been adequately developed. Therefore, in my opinion, more relationship between Thai local administration and Japanese local government should be developed. Besides promoting the sister city relationship between Bangkok and other Japanese local government, relationship between other Thai local administration and Japanese local government should also be promoted. Right? Is it, for example, between Chiang Mai and Osaka, right? The trading center and cultural center in Kansai and northern Thailand. Is it nice for these 2 cities to create sister city relationship, or probably between the first capital city of Thailand, Sukhothai, and the first city of Japan, Nara? Should they create some kind of sister city relationship? I think another city in the ASEAN also, I think it is the right time, right, to create more relationship in this type. In this globalizing world, many new actors have increased their active role in international arena. The relationship among ASEAN members and between ASEAN and Japan are not an exception. As economic and socio-cultural dynamic region, many new actors inevitably emerge to shape their relationships. Besides, many actors will have to be considered in order to improve the cooperation in this region. Local administration and local governments are also becoming important actors which can be utilized for the people well-being in this region also. Thank you.